beyond measure by COVID-19 pandemic. And for the first time, it is a pandemic that has punctuated the entire creation. It has never happened since the creation of creation, or call it the creation of the universe. This is the only moment we are seeing a pandemic from the spiritual world, stopping the world, affecting the economy, social life, and the political activities. So we have a very big problem to contend with, because we have been strongly disorganized by this natural phenomenon. And the other factor that has affected us politically, I think, is the BBI thesis. In political, let's say, political dynamics, I think the dialectics of BBI have hit the opposite side, and that is the antithesis. So we don't know what the thesis, the new thesis or the synthesis will be. And this is one of the situations that we have to grapple with, because all on board or aboard the BBI has been scattered with a crash at the law courts. And next, we also have a big problem at a public level, leave alone focusing these issues on Parliament and the rest of the institutions for progress. We also have to look at the public mind in terms of the requirements, I think, for the next leadership, starting from the county assembly all the way up to the National Assembly. That is the Parliament. The requirement that you need a degree to run for leadership in 2022 August, which is barely 15 months to go, I think is a very serious matter. Why? Because we have very known areas that have been marginalized by insecurity, natural disasters, that is drought, you come to floods, and the rest of the things, to the extent that we need a reality check to establish the degree of literacy in terms of degrees in most of these areas, particularly the northeastern region, the northern region, and the coastal region, and the Rift Valley region, where these problems have affected the sedentary life and the progress of the people thereof. So we need to carry out a reality check to know how many constituencies, how many wards are going to be excluded from leadership come August 2022 because of this big requirement. So these are basically the issues to contend with, as we also look at the situation that pertains or obtains at the real state actors or the key actors, and also the duty bearers when it comes to these election matters. Whom am I referring to? I'm talking about the state, the funding situation. Where are we? How strong is our economy to deal with the referendum and also to deal with the general election, August 2022? Do we really have funds, and how prepared is the state in handling this matter? Secondly, we look at the crash of the of the BBI. What does it portend now that we are moving towards the referendum and it has become uncertain? How are we going to deal with it? This is a legislative matter affecting the judiciary also, and we have yet to find a solution to this. So this state of uncertainty is the one what we need to zero in and find a solution to. Now looking at the IBC, key actor in the elections, how prepared is it? It has been eroded in many ways, and we need to see how to patch it up and ensure that it is strong enough to handle the coming elections. Particularly on the integrity factor, the conflicts have affected the integrity of IBC, the way it stands, and we don't know the quality and the character of the incoming commissioners. Are they going to be bamboozled around by the state and the other factors to the extent that they don't perform. Now, these are the fears that we have. Now, we also have to look at the situation at the political parties disputes tribunal. Now, there are conflicting issues between the tribunal and IBC when it comes to disputes resolution. The concurrent factor in the task. How do we get rid of it? And how do we also ensure that the time set for resolution of political disputes at the tribunal is shortened from 3 months? Because this can conflict with the election timelines to the extent that the matters can be resolved beyond the election deadline, and that would be terrible. So we need to see what is happening there. At Parliament, I think Madam Jane has really helped us to understand what is going on, and we need to know how soon they will end up this matter or clear whatever is pending in their trays to enable us prepare for the August 8th elections. At the judiciary, this is a very worrying factor, because look at the beef between the executive and the judiciary and the extent it has affected smooth operations at the judiciary. And to what extent is the judiciary going to respond to this matter positively or negatively in the resolution of this seeming dispute between the state, the executive and the judiciary, plus the parliament. So these are areas we need to look at holistically and update ourselves on whether they are on track when it comes to the elections of August 2022, or we are still very far insofar as this preparedness is concerned. So let me leave it there for the time being as we prepare to delve into the issues during the actual discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think you've given us a very broad overview, which we'll also be pegging our thoughts on as we ensue or continue with the meeting, as it were. But most importantly was just to maybe also hang on what you're talking about, the IBC bill, because we want to go through these particular bills and the acts that we do have currently and how effective they are in terms of course, streamrolling electoral reforms in the country, as I mentioned earlier. So we've given us a very broad panoramic view of where we sit as a country currently, from IBC down to what is currently happening with the judiciary right now. And of course, we know also with the BBI stalemate as it stands right now. But I want just to rope you in, Jennifer, just beginning with where we had Stephen leaving us with the IBC bill. First of all, we know what is happening. We have a task force right now that is trying to, get the commissioners to try and fill up the gaps that are left with the other commissioners who exited. And we know, as it were, people now are saying IBC is not properly constituted. And that is a big challenge. It's open to, of course, people now rallying into courts to try and challenge that particular eventuality. People are questioning also on the work that they've done before. The three commissioners, as it were, together, the chair. Could you kindly just take us through what the IBC really means right now? And we're trying to implement this. How long is it on the first, the second reading, the third reading? When will it be assented to by the president? What are some of the challenges that we do have with this current IBC bill? What are some of the salient points that you think that are critical also when it comes to looking at the electoral forms in light of this particular bill? Jennifer, if you're there. Jennifer, remember to unmute your mic.
I'm forgetting. The IEBC is established under Article 88 of the Constitution of Kenya. And further, it states within that any commission, and this is for all commissions, there is a chapter on the in the Constitution on independent commissions and independent officers. And this particular chapter addresses the number of commissioners that will sit on these commissions. And it says not less than 3 and not more than 7. So as we speak, and in accordance with the Constitution of Kenya, the IEBC can still conduct its duties, and indeed has been doing in the several by-elections that we have had, and I think we're having a couple of by-elections this week, because they do still have 3 members. If you remember, they were a set 3 members who resigned together and left, and I think there was Rosalind Okombe. No, she was working for the, or was she a commissioner? I cannot remember. She was a commissioner. Yeah, she was a commissioner. So what has happened is now there is because the minimum, the maximum you can have is, I think, 9 commissioners. I will double check on that, on the composition of the commissioners. Yes. And what has happened is, I did hear it being said that there's a credibility issue with regards to this panel that is going to identify these commissioners. Now, what I want to state very clearly is that these commissioners, the panel that has been chosen to identify these commissioners is a panel that has been empaneled by various bodies. And these bodies are the Law Society of Kenya, which has sent the name of 1 nominee. There is the Parliamentary Service Commission, which has sent 3 nominees, and these were the amendments to the IEBC Act. And then there is the Interreligious Group, which have also sent their nominee. So if you see the various bodies, civil society, religious groups, and Parliament itself, who have sent their nominees to vet or to start the process of the vetting of the commissioners, I think it is representative of the face of Kenya. Omatata had filed a petition last year in November challenging the fact that that Parliament could choose, I think it was 4 nominees, 2 women and 2 men. And I don't know, I've not read his petition, but I question it because Parliament is probably one of the places where it is representative. It is not one of, well, it is, along with the county assemblies, of the people and the face of Kenya. You have opposition, you have the ruling party, and the Parliamentary Service Commission is composed of all these interests. The IEBC Amendment Bill undertook its first reading, and there were these amendments which now increase the number of commissioners, and it was assented to by the President in October 2020, if my memory serves me well. And it was really to increase the number of commissioners. I think when we look back at the 2017 election, not that the composition of the IEBC is going to resolve our cyclical violence and issues of the winner takes it all, but there was a lot of concern or frustrations with regards to the IEBC. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court did uphold the presidential election victory of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. So to state, and I want to categorically state that the process is ongoing, and it is indeed because of the representatives of those bodies that I have named, it would be, in my considered opinion, and very respectfully, I think a transparent process.
A transparent process. Maybe just to latch on what you said as well, the question of the current scenario that we do have with 3 commissioners running the electoral bodies, as it were. We've seen with the recent judgments as well, the issue of quorum was raised. They're saying, yeah, it is incoherent as it is. They're not substantive number to carry out, huge tasks or huge obligations like referendum. Yet we've seen them saying, oh yeah, come also the by-elections that we do have on the ground, we're we are set, we are ready, we are prepared. Do you find that this is a spawning ground for litigations as well, moving forward, even with the by-elections that have been carried out as well? That should be a ticklish issue as far as inquiry number is concerned within the IBC. Briefly.
Okay, Debal, I want to read word by word from the Constitution of Kenya, so that it is not said that I am stating something else. Article 250 of the Constitution of Kenya, subclause 1 says, each commission shall consist of at least 3, but not more than 9 members. And as we speak now, the IEBC does consist of 3 members. So it is constitutionally constituted in accordance with the Constitution at its minimum, which is 3. In the unlikely event should something happen and you don't want a situation like that, then of course it would give rise to a lot of problems. The fact is that it is constitutionally constituted, because if it were not, these by-elections would have been challenged in a court of law. The only challenge I know of is the one by Okiki Omatata complaining, or in his petition, raising issues about the fact that the Parliamentary Service Commission shall nominate 4 of the commission members. So at this point, yes, they are constitutionally constituted. Is it an ideal situation? Of course not, because any nation, any company, any organization must have a continuity plan and a backup plan. And yes, they are at their bare minimum, and it is important that the IEBC is fully constituted in the event that the country needs to go to a referendum or for whatever other reasons.
Well, maybe also the Constitution envisioned, a scenario where you would really have the bare minimum, and of course not also crossing over to that particular nine figure of the commissioners as well. But given the 3 commissioners, as it were, do you think also they have the wherewithal and the capacity? They could be constitutionally, of course, constitutionally mandated, as it were, the 3 of them. But they're running thin as far as capacity is concerned. Do they have the wherewithal in terms of capacity to run an effective, maybe given a referendum or even an election, as it were, before we?
Well, thank you, Debal. They have conducted by-elections successfully, and they're going to do so in the coming days. Do they have the wherewithal to conduct a referendum? I don't. A referendum is very different from an election. Actually, it's far simpler, because it's not hundreds and hundreds of candidates. It's really questions, and it's yes or no. Having said that, I'm saying that in the essence of, and in the plan for a continuity plan, and which I said for every organization, wherever you have people or organized society, whether it is the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, whether it is your home, whether it is a company, a corporation, you must have a continuity plan. So in the event, it is not an ideal situation to be what is the word I'm looking for? To be operating at your bare minimum. It's definitely not. And so the process of the recruitment of the other commissioners is definitely one of high priority. You must have at least the basic minimum of at least 4 to 5 commissioners in place.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Maybe to rope in Stephen on this as well. Just looking at the time and talking about, elections next year, and harking back to what the Kriegler report was talking about, at least we should have an intact electoral body, 2 years before the general election. People will wonder, then, why do we try to do things under the wire? Because it's just a few months to the next general election. Right now is when we are looking at the commissioners, as it were. What were we doing all these other times we're now honestly looking for commissioners? Were we twiddling our thumbs? People will ask. right? And time is of the essence. Why are we cutting it too close? Is that what was envisioned? Maybe by Kriegler report, 2 years, and I think also that is a mandate from the Constitution. Well, you'll forgive my deficiency on that knowledge, but you're here also to enlighten me.
Question. In the first place, I would say, wow unto whoever dismantled IPPG as the foundation of the electoral body in Kenya. It's the only time that we had a very stable electoral body based on the formula that was created to allow political parties second commissioners to the electoral body. And the things went on very well for quite a long time until Kivuitu was disempowered. And during then, it was very easy to fill vacancies at the IBC, because if a commissioner belonged to a particular party resigned or was recalled, the vacancy was refilled immediately by the same political party, and we never had this vacuum, this awkward situation that we're facing in our history up to now. And we still have problems reconstituting. The politics of reconstitution has not settled, and we just don't know whether it will give us the right people we want, or it will solve the problem that we're facing or not. So this problem has created a very unstable IBC, and we need to relook at the current formula and probably blend with the past experience to ensure that we have a stable IBC. Regarding performance, since the departure, voluntary departure of a number of commissioners previously, I think we must allow the IBC, irrespective of its meanness, for having done very well in the by-elections and setting the election calendar. As political parties, we have no complaint at that level because they have done very well. There is nothing that they have done to force us to go to court, and they said they are inadequate here. And probably it calls for a general relook on whether we need more commissioners or not, just based on the experience of the performance of these three. What is more urgent at the IBC, apart from bringing in more commissioners to buttress the capacity? I think are the internal weaknesses, particularly when it comes to the eroding or rather decaying systems, ICT systems, that we need as a country to run an election. Yeah, you know the server, it's good that they have gone out to say they need somebody to come in. Between now and August 2022, I believe they would have solved this problem if they are given money by the state. When it comes to the voter registration data, the upgrading is also imperative, and they have pointed out, they have taken action, and this is good news for us. So as long as they're empowered, we believe they'll be able to do the right thing to enable us hold an election, whether they are three or not. That's my take.
Yes.
You hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
It's important for me to weigh in on this issue of electoral violence. And it's very important for the historical record to understand that it's not only in 2007 that we had electoral violence. From the advent of multi-party democracy in Kenya in 1992, we have had, to varying degrees, electoral violence. We had it in 1992. We had it in 92, the following election when they had the clashes in Kwale. And okay, not every single election, but definitely 1992, 1998, 2007, which was really the worst type of electoral violence we saw in this country. But the pattern has been that the violence is more, since the advent of multi-party democracy, is more accent, the stakes are higher when you have when the 207, when it was 207, President Kibaki had run in 2003, and then he won, and then 2007 in his second term. And very much like 2013, when His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta ran, you didn't have the violence as you are now, that is now being anticipated at this point. But yes, we did have the violence of the election when we had the resist movement by the NASA coalition. So we had it in those 2 years when you have the second term of a president running. So that's the interested second term of the presidential election. So that's an interesting point that must be noted. And if you will note that it is what drove this country to the handshake and to the BBI process, because at the cost, I heard Stephen addressing the issue of the economy, how much money do we have within this pandemic, because it has been a very, very difficult year for all Kenyans. But the point is, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to continue this cycle of violence where you have trillions of shillings being lost in an economic year because at the end of the day, let me talk about the British Empire. They came with the 3 C's. They said those were their 3 C's: civilization, commerce, and Christianity. But they were driven, empires are driven, superpowers are driven by commerce. And that is what makes you a superpower. Now, if we cannot go to that level and become a country that is really operating at that level of, where we've raised incomes, we're in the second world, or we're moving into the first world, then all politics really will make no sense. Because ultimately what's crucially important is for every Kenyan to be able to, first, the basic rights, right to health, right to food, right to housing, etc., and then be able to make a living. So I think it is important for us to try and understand that we cannot continue this electoral violence, and I think to ask ourselves, because we have and continue to have a cycle of electoral violence. And what is bringing about this electoral violence? In my considered opinion, and in the opinion of the promoters of and supporters of BBI, it was because, and again I stated, at the advent of multi-party democracy, we had a situation of the winner takes it all. You have countries which have what you call a consociational democracy, whereby you have regions. And once you've had a president from a particular region, it rotates. It's a rotational type of democracy. The reality is, and you will hear people saying it, and it is a fact, that 58 years down the line, we have only had in this country presidents come from 2 ethnic groups within this country. So it is a winner. The stakes are very, very high. The violence is what I don't understand. If you look at the 2017 election, when the Supreme Court nullified the election, the NASA coalition were elated and they believed in the Supreme Court. However, subsequently at the second presidential election, when the Supreme Court upheld the election, the very same Supreme Court, the NASA coalition refused to accept the ruling and the outcome of this election. So politics is a very emotive issue. It's a very real issue. And I think that it is important that we understand it and discuss it in that way.
Thank you. And maybe the important question that will come to the fore is the fact that, yes, we've had all this election violence. It's cyclical every year or every 5 years that we're coming towards elections. We have that tension. We have, that fear. People are under fear and trepidation that now what will happen, the environment is getting a bit toxic. But the question is this solely pegged on elections or electoral reforms? Because we seem to be talking a good game about it every 5 years. Oh, this is electoral reforms. Is that a panacea that once we solve this, then That is a prime.
If you remember, I don't know, maybe you were a bit too young for that, but 2007, when we saw the outbreak of the worst electoral violence in this country, is when we had all the various commissions and finally the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. This is what fast-tracked the promulgation of this constitution, that the entire country hoped and believed that never again would we see electoral violence in this country. Having stated that, in 2013, yes, the election was pretty peaceful, but fast forward to 2017, and we all know what happened. So electoral reforms is and if you look, and we can just look next door at Tanzania, and let me also state something that might be very controversial. I think that nations and societies have to grow organically. If you look at some of the greatest democracies in this world, France and England, they were monarchs, absolute monarchs. Of course, the French went through a revolution. They were absolute. You look at the United States of America, they actually went through a civil war. You had a situation where the issue of slavery and the North and the South went through a horrific civil war, but they were progressing naturally. Now, the reality is, and this is as controversial as it may sound, it is a fact that the push for multi-party democracy in Africa began with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And the Berlin Wall fell, and then the outsourcing of democracy by the United States and Western powers was brought to Africa. We do know that prior to that, these superpowers, Soviet Union, United States of America, funded and propped up puppet leaders for their own interests. The question we should ask ourselves is, if, let's say, within KANU, and it had not been so, I'm looking for a word, if within KANU they had had a democratic process where you didn't expel people and you could vie from it within the party fairly and squarely, would this have been better for us? I state this because, and I look for this and I must read it to you. It's a book, it's a book by, it's the Moi Succession Election 2002 by Herve Mapao, Musambai Katumanga, and others. And it says that the lessons learned since the restoration of multi-party politics have demonstrated beyond doubt that the only ideology that informs electoral behavior is ethnicity, tinged with patronage politics and the pursuit of personal power and glory. We have become more ethnic today than we were at the advent of multi-party democracy.
Well, Jennifer, before I go to Stephen, but many will argue and say there's nothing bad at all with ethnicity. The diversity that we have as a country is beautiful. And I think also towards genocide, the book by Koigi Omwere as well. He say ethnicity is not really, something that we should eschew as a country. You should embrace it. But it is the negative.
It's when it's politicized.
Yes, yes.
When we embrace our ethnicity, but when I'm stating that today, the fact is that political parties are along ethnic groupings. Yes, I've just asked that question. In 58 years of the independence of Kenya, how many ethnic groups in this vast, beautiful country with different ethnic groups and larger and smaller have you seen become, power has only been shared between two ethnic groups? So I'm not criticizing ethnicity, I embrace ethnicity. But I'm stating the facts that our politics has become more ethnicized than it has ever been since the advent of multi-party democracy. In the first, you know what happened in the 1992 clashes, where they were removing Kikuyus from Molo, from Nakuru. We're all aware of that.
Yeah. Right. And I'd agree with you. Yeah, we embrace it because Koigi really advances the idea that there's nothing solely bad with it. It is, what he says we should use is a negative ethnicity. the negative ethnicity that you're truly talking about, that will be the more apropos.
We're not talking about negative ethnicity, Debal. We're talking about the fact that the electoral behavior in this country, it's not negative ethnicity when I decide, okay, you know what, I'm just going to vote for this person because they are from this ethnic group. Negative ethnicity is a type where you consider a particular group of people not worthy or not worthy to have jobs or things like that. We're talking about the fact that our politics has become ethnicized. It is not the politics of, okay, I can vote for Dibal or I can vote for Jennifer, but the first thing you will be asked is, what tribe or what ethnicity do you belong to? And people will vote for their own. That is a fact. The patterns show it.
All right. Let me just and drop Stephen on this as well. Then are we really batting our heads with the wall? Since we can see the way we normally fashion our politics is on ethnicity. That's what do you bring on the table? What fractions of numbers do you have from your community? When we're talking about electoral reforms and still we've not dealt with ethnicity, then are we just backing the wrong tree here, Stephen?
Ethnicity is a factor in our midst, and a permanent one, whether we like it or not. The issue that we ought to deal with is how to distribute whatever little wealth we have equitably, and how do we also organize our government and the systems of governance, I think, to generate more wealth for the ethnicities to gobble. If we don't do that, then we create a more bigger problem than what we expect. But as we are, I think devolution to a great extent has addressed this issue because it has developed resources and leadership to the extent that quite a number of ethnicities feel happy to look after their own welfare and to deal with their own development. So one way of dealing with ethnicity positively and respecting it as a natural phenomenon is, I think, the question of equal opportunities. And what adds a problem to our political system is now at the top. At the state level, I think we need to deal with the system of governance that is presidential, see what it has created, the vicious rivalry and competition for power. The scramble is vicious, and what we need to do is to look for a way of moderating the sharing of power at the national level. BBI was trying to do this. I don't know how we shall pick up with a crash at the judiciary, and we need to revive this issue and face it squarely and ask the people to help us as leaders to overcome the power struggle at the national level. Only then can we reduce this vicious ethnicity and make people feel satisfied that at least they have access to the national leadership and also access to the devolved leadership.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Back to you, Jennifer. And I think there's a question also I floated regarding the timelines. We can see, yes, we are looking to fill up the 4 vacant position of the commissioners right now. I was asking what were we doing before this. We've known that they've not been there for quite a while. Kriegler reports suggest that, at least the commission should be intact 2 years, towards the general election, right? Are we in any way abrogating this? Why are we doing it under the wire? And don't you think also this foments and brings out the spawning ground for frustrations, tensions, fear, and trepidation?
Thank you, Debal. Am I on?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. The major issue since after the 2017 election, and if we remember, is that continuous cycle of violence until 2018, when we saw the handshake between the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga and His Excellency the President. And that became a pressing issue for this country. The referendum, yes, a lot of these, we had an IEBC in place in 2017, and we still had election violence. I keep on going back to what is the root cause of this election violence. It is what BBI was trying to address, that it's a winner takes it all situation. It is you're either in or out. The expansion of the executive would have created space, because a winner takes it all does not sit with the conscience of Africans of it's I have won, it's all mine. And I'm not a sociologist, but to a certain extent, I think that we can all comment on how we live within our spheres, within our ethnic groups. We share everything. You cannot, it's considered distasteful to have something bigger and better. If you can do that in the anonymity of Nairobi, where nobody knows, but not where you come from and back home. We share. So this thing of it's me, I've won, I've taken everything, just doesn't sit within the conscience of people of Africans and Kenyans. And that was why they expanded the executive and said, it's because either it's always going to be the largest two tribes in this country, or we expand it and we have we can bring in other ethnic groups. If you look at the race between Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta, the Kikuyu vote was split, but to the last man in Western and Bungoma, they voted for Mwai Kibaki and handed him that victory because his deputy was Kijana Wamalwa. And that was the reality. So is it going to revolve around Kikuyus, Kalenjins, Luyas, Luos, and that's it? This is the issue, and we must address that. We can talk about electoral reforms and talk about electoral reforms until the cows come home. But 2010, we were hopeful. President Kibaki became president, we were voted the most optimistic people in the world. That was in 2003. And by 27, we were in post-election, 2007 in post-election violence, horrific post-election violence. So get to understanding the soul of this country and what really bedevils us. Having said that, I want to agree with Stephen. Indeed, devolution is the best thing that ever happened to this country. If you go to counties like Turkana, which I went several years ago, I've not been recently, the only government there was the Catholic Church. They were the government. When you go to every sub-county, you went to the Catholic Church, you paid a courtesy because they were the only organization doing anything. But now, if I talk about my own county, Kakamega, I can see the incredible gains of devolution. And until we get to that point where everyone is not flocking to Nairobi because everything is happening in Nairobi, you look at countries, let's not even talk about the United States and England, but other countries in Asia, where you can live in other cities besides just Nairobi and Mombasa and generate as much income as you would be doing in Nairobi. So with devolution, strengthening of devolution, and enlarging the executive where everyone, or at least several more, feel included.
Okay, thank you very much. I still want to draw you back on the issue of timelines as well, because I remember the IBC had written also an open letter to Kenyans, and it was published, via their website and also on the dailies as well. And there was the enactment of electoral laws that I'm able to read and just look at it right now here on my computer. And it says that the persistent enactment or amendment of electoral laws too close to elections undermines planning and implementation of electoral activities within the state.
Who was saying?
This is Chebukati, an open letter to Kenyans. He says the persistent enactment or amendment of electoral laws too close to elections undermines planning and implementation of electoral activities within the set electoral timelines. The international best practice is to cease enactment of electoral laws at least 2 years to a general election. This is also the key recommendations made by the Kriegler Commission, as I mentioned. During election season, just let me finish, just a moment. During the election season, some political players have a habit of filing numerous cases in courts in order to influence Commission's decision operations. Unfortunately, pronouncements of some of the court's decisions are made too close to elections date, thereby affecting commissioners' preparedness. In light of this, before we move on, do you wanted to say something, or can I rope in Stephen, then I come back to you, Jennifer?
If you can rope in Stephen.
Stephen, you can comment on this. Cutting it too close, this also seems to be pain points from the IBC commissioner. They feel frustrated at times when we cut it too close. They want time so that they can actually be able also to operate effectively and prepare themselves effectively. Stephen?
I agree with you, Diba. I think we must blame whoever is responsible for this kind of situation in our midst. We need a timeline in which legislations are enacted to give the duty bearers time, I think, to do their business. But if they come too close to the election line, as you've said, we all get troubled. And this is a historical fact with us. We need to deal with it. Secondly, there is always another problem, real or imagined, that affects the operations of the Electoral Commission and also catalyzes violence. And this is the presence of the invisible hand in the operations of IBC. Whether real or not, it's a fact that annoys and causes people to go violent because they believe they have been robbed through this invisible hand in the operations of the IBC. So we need to deal with that and IBC from election time so that we have, or whatever they give us, elections. Now, we also have a problem amongst ourselves. Now, the contentment that as a politician, you will never lose an election. You only won, I mean, you really won, but you are rigged out, even if you didn't win. So this contention is a bad mentality, and we must bang it out. And this is all about our value system, which is very low, and we need to look for ways, as I've seen a very good comment from members, that we must implement our constitution because the measures to pump up our value system in terms of integrity are already ingrained, but to what extent have we gone? So we need to look at that to ensure that we have the timelines are observed, and we also have a high level of integrity, I think, practiced by all at the IBC and the general public to give us a peaceful election.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. Jennifer?
Yes, the Chebukati, who is my colleague and an advocate for myself, was actually sworn in January of 2017. Within 6 months, we went to a general election. It is not an ideal situation, but if the circumstances, the prevailing circumstances are such in a fluid situation, in fluid the events that are taking place in a nation like ours, then of course, yes, I would say and definitely there are certain things that you must be able to do, or you must have done, like delimitation of boundaries at least a year before a national election. But we conducted an election. Chebukati defended the results of that election in spite of being sworn in and becoming the chairman of the IEBC less than 6 months to that election. I do agree it's not ideal. Having said that, we just have to deal with what is most important to us, is sorting out the playing field. And I want to agree that with Stephen again, yes, you can never lose an election and unfortunately, Maybe because we don't believe that the process is that transparent. Maybe we study the jostling now of the panel that is going to interview the applicants for commissioners to be positioned on the or to become commissioners of the IEBC Commission. And that's very, very, very important, because you need to really, and everyone is political and everybody has political inclinations, but you need to ensure that you have very honest people who will work in the best interest of the people of Kenya, and not to serve a political party because they will be on that commission.
Thank you, Jennifer. Even as we want to drill down deeper and talk about the Campaign Finance Act, I will also want to bring up something that has been also a frustration of IBC, where Chebukati was saying, if commissioners are appointed for a duration of 4 years, they will plan for an election that they will not conduct, whereas the new team that replaces them will conduct an election that they did not plan. This is what we're talking about, the high turnover of commissioners and staff. Thus, ownership and accountability of the electoral process will be lost in the transition. What he was suggesting is also the perpetual disbursement, you're saying, of IBC staff and commissioners after every contested election often leads to loss of institutional memory and instability. High turnover of a decision-making body, that is the commissioners, a demotivation leading to loss of competent and also experienced staff, and loss of incremental gains in electoral management. The net effect of meddling with the IBC is inadequate preparedness for subsequent elections, leading to electoral disputes, especially for presidential results, a scenario that is likely to recur in 2022 general election. Maybe a comment on this briefly, then we go to the campaign.
I'll comment on it.
Yes.
Yes, the Constitution again is very clear. Article 250, subclause 6, a member of a commission or the holder of an independent office shall be appointed for a single term of 6 years and is not eligible for reappointment. So the term of Mr. Chebukati will end in 2023. There is no high turnover. He is there, he's appointed for, and the others are there for a term of 6 years. What happened is that you had 4 commissioners who did resign. Had they not resigned, they would still be there.
All right. Okay, let's move on to, unless Stephen also you want to weigh in on this briefly before we move on to the Campaign Financing Act. Stephen, briefly.
No, that comment you made before Mheshimiwa came in, I think said it all. I can't repeat or I can't add anything.
Fantastic.
It's compact and powerful.
Fantastic. Okay. A big one as well, the Campaign Financing Act. And this, we want to see what has been the discernible difference since we had this particular act shaking into place. Because people are wondering, as soon as we're done with one election, we're hitting the ground running again in a perpetual election mode from the word go. So you have a new, tenor of government, but also people who are still in electoral campaigning mode. Where does the Campaign Financing Act really come in? You talked about the criminal enterprises as well. Then how do we also make sure that this is truly insulated within this particular act, that we have sources of funds, people are accountable with these sources of funds from where it is emanating from, the source of the funds to where it is going as well. And we don't have also interference or maybe the shadow companies that are hiding behind these sources of funds as well. Let's just open the discussion around that and try and drill deep and see, is Campaign Financing Act being implemented effectively? Jennifer, we begin with you.
I don't sit on the body that monitors the campaigns and takes in. I do remember having run for a office once, yeah, and having to provide the basically information on where I got my campaign finances from. Having said that, a Campaign Finance Act is extremely, law is extremely important because, like I said, it is important more so not just only for criminal enterprises, but even from foreign interference. One of the sections of the Campaign Finance Act states that it will be that we can, as a politician, or the Campaign Finance Act of 2013, which came into force immediately after the election of 2017, states that you can, you have to give in the receipt, they have to get, the expenditure reports have to be provided, etc., etc. But it does say that you can receive technical assistance from foreign government. I think there's no problem with receiving technical assistance, but it's very important as a country and as a nation to always take cognizance of the security aspects of our nation, and those aspects are at every level. Because who is giving us this technical assistance? What type of technical assistance is it? If it's an organization like the Center for Multi-Democracy, which engages so much in civic education, that is great, but other things can be shrouded in technical assistance, and they could be machines for voting. You saw the debacle and the debate that went on in the United States with these the machines that were being used to vote. So it is an important legislation, but the legislation, or any legislation, is as good if it's not practiced, if it's not enforced, is as good as the paper that it's written on. And I think that's what is crucial, is that we must hold political parties to that accountability, to campaign financing, to disclose where they get their monies from. I think it's one of the greatest contributions for not all politicians, but a driver for, you spend so much in an election. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense to me. It's mind-boggling. If you will do the calculations for what somebody may campaign for in a county assembly or in the National Assembly, it's far more than they would ever get in their salary from Parliament or from the ward. So how do you fill this gap? Where do you fill this gap from? And this, in my considered opinion, is one of the contributors to corruption. So any legislation that really is implemented and not forcefully, but implemented and acted upon, is that where do you get your campaign finances from, is really crucial in the fight against corruption. Having said that, I also wanted to just go back to the IEBC issue and the representatives. One of the nominees for the commissioners to the IEBC will be from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And I think that's really a welcome move in view of the fact that we see the renewed impetus from this particular commission in the fight against corruption.
Right, thank you. Stephen, maybe you want to weigh in on that. My question to you would be, how does the Campaign Financing Act also, in a way, try and shape the ideological commitment of a party? When we're talking about corruption, and we have the common saying that he who really pays the piper calls the tune as well. So do you think you can uncouple the campaign financing from the ideological commitment of a party? Because at the end of the day, it is the person who's really bankrolling you also will shape your ideology. Very briefly.
Thanks, Debala. First of all, take note that the elements in our election that we are discussing now were proposed by the fathers of Ford Kenya, particularly Musikari Kombo, when he was the MP. You remember he came up with his political parties funding bill, which was, it was a motion, and then later it was taken up by the stakeholders through the support of Frederick Ebert Foundation, National Democratic Institute, until it became the Political Parties Act 2007. So then
has he gone off air?
Intermittent.
And recreated in 2011 is the financing bits. May I go on?
Yeah, please go, Stephen.
May I go on?
Kindly, just a moment, Stephen. Margaret, if you can just mute your mic, please. I'll be very happy. And also Peter Kamau as well. I can see some interferences has been coming through from both of you. Margaret Ndanyi, your mic is on, please.
Yes.
All right. Just
unmute, please. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you remember the list of shame that also originated from Honorable Kombo is what led to the Economic Crimes Act and the Integrity Chapter. Now, the Finance Act is a very important component of our efforts as Kenyans to make sure that we reduce expenditures by politicians during the campaign period. And the object was to decommercialize political campaigns because it leaves out very important leaders and it just brings on board rotten characters because they can afford to steal money here, and the core factors that has built corruption in Kenya up to the level we are. So the object of the act is to control money in politics and leave it for development. And so to me, it's a very important initiative, and we must strengthen it. We must implement it because minus it, the ideological inclination will disappear, and the corruption will be the biggest ideology in the country and in the mind of our electoral process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jabal, I just want to wait at one more thing that I omitted, is that, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes, this Elections Campaign Financing Act, categorically does state that it was to come into force immediately after the general election of 2017. And one of the important issues, and I just want to read this out for you, is on the part 3, article section 5, that a political party shall, at least 3 months before the nomination of its candidates, submit its party campaign expenditure rules to the commission. Yes, so that's what's important. And yes, it is, but like I said, and I want to repeat it again, if and only you implement the law, then there's no point having these laws if we don't implement them.
So how do we address the issue? And I can see, I think it was Lillian who had raised also that particular issue. How do we tackle the issue of being consistently on a campaign mode as a country, especially from our leaders? We can see they're not really settling down to deliver on the manifesto, what they promised Kenyans. It is what right now, once they settle, it is just campaigns. And I think we can attest to that particular fact. You've seen this, and people have been complaining, when will you settle down and work?
I doubt that the president is in a campaign mode. He's serving his last term, so he has been working. I think it's just the nature of our politics, but more specific again to this transitional period, because you have a president who is serving his second and last term. That yes, it's unfortunate. We seem to be in a constant campaign mode of politics, and we've seen that with the political leadership. Having said that, there are those who are in a campaign mode of, and also you will see it not only with the presidential candidates, you can see people gearing up. I mean, I'm on social media and I watch people, and I can tell who wants to run for office by the things they start doing and what they're putting on Twitter and what they're putting on Facebook. And that is good. I mean, if you want to take part in the political process of your country, I think it's fantastic. We always have this choice of, better leadership, etc. I do think that it's unfortunate that we spend too much time politicking and negative politics, and I wish that we didn't have to do that. I think what has happened in the last, but this was a very, it's much like the 2007 post-election violence, where we went on for about 3 years until the promulgation of the Constitution. We had commissions, we had commissions of inquiry, we had the constitutional process, and we're very much in the same situation going. And I think that that's why, and I keep an eye I don't want to sound like a broken record, we need to find that solution that will solve those problems. And as I say unapologetically, I think the BBI was that solution and will be and remains that solution, given that they traveled around the country, the task force talked to the people, they got at least 7,000 memoranda. So personally, for me, I think that is the solution.
Any refinements from the article of the Act itself that stipulates, a given time frame that when you should be on a campaign mode? Because I think if we adhere to that, then that will actually solve the problem of this campaign mode that we are really talking about, that is consistently there. Are there leaders also in breach of that? Briefly, then we move on to Stephen.
No, I like that question, and I'm laughing. I think it would be a very good legislation. Yeah, that we're in continuous, but I think throughout our lives, we're continuously campaigning for whatever cause it is, yes? I think what it is, the legislation is no campaigning before an X number of days before an election, yes? But you can't really stop people from campaigning and advocating for what they believe in. But I agree with you. I think it would be a much needed break for this country.
Right, thank you. Stephen, what do you think?
It's a very healthy situation, because it's one of the elements that we need in our governance, and that is the check and the balances. So if there is a leader doing a good job, the populace and the rest of competitors will have very little to say. But if you are doing contrary to public expectation, expect what you call this situation that you're talking about. So it's only good governance, good leadership that can moderate competition, but minus it, expect a hell lot of it. So it's a health factor in our politics and a democratic factor, and it ought to go on to ensure that our leaders are accountable. So in a nutshell, it's not a problem to me. It's very good.
Jennifer,
yes.
If we don't really talk about also the gender question in regard to this campaign financing act, because I think also largely why we really sought out to have this particular act is how our women, they were, disenfranchised, with financing, because most of them, they will say they don't have the wherewithal compared to the men as well. Do you think also this has brought to bear a solution in terms of addressing the imbalance when it comes to financing, because this was really working against our women in the country?
I think, am I on mute or on? Can you hear me? Dibal, can you hear me?
Perfectly, we can hear you. Go on.
Yes, the representation of special interest groups laws is what will address this specific issue. And law is never in isolation, and it's not just a standalone act. The status of this particular bill or act is that it was passed by the National Assembly last year, 11th of March 2020. You are aware there was the pandemic, which stopped, basically slowed down everybody. And at some point around that time, we did go on recess for quite a long period. And the bill has been sent to the Senate, and it is being processed at the Senate. So in this representation of special interest groups, it will address that issue of the gender marginalized, marginalized groups, ethnicity, etc., marginalized groups along the lines of ethnicity. Having said that, it's still very, very difficult for women, simply because women don't politic in the same way that men do. And I'm trying to choose my words carefully. Even in business, even in the corporate world, after work, you'll find that men will retreat or go to a restaurant or go for a drink, and they're constantly discussing and having discussions around either their businesses or their politics or their corporations. Women have added responsibilities and have to take on those added responsibilities. And we have seen incredible, I've seen, the Charity Ngilu, who is a trailblazer, Martha Karua, another trailblazer, women who've run for presidential as presidential candidates, women who have run for governors and made it. And yes, I still think that the issue of gender, and I'm being very, very pensive as I think through this, not because I'm choosing my words, I really, we still have a long way to go. And the responsibility on that issue begins in the home. And I say that because I am very much a product of my own parents and their belief in girls, because my late father had 5 girls and 1 boy. And from the onset, he felt it was very important to empower women. Having said that, society doesn't. So when we had the special seats for women in the what you call the women reps, and we do have them in the BBI in the Constitutional Amendment Bill, that it will go a long way. We're not making the kind of progress we would like to have made in this country, but we're doing better than even some Western countries.
But I thought maybe in some way the campaign act, the financing act also was to address this issue.
No, the campaign, it's really an act to ensure the and a check on the campaign financing and transparency on campaign financing. Like I said, of the political party. It's a reporting mechanism. It's the political party that must report that this is where, like I said, it's important. It's just like in the United States, the president of the Republic of the United States cannot accept a gift, I think, of more than $100 from a foreigner, a foreign head of state, a president, a queen, a king, a monarch. And should he get this gift, it belongs to the state. So it's really to ensure issues of transparency and national security.
There's also
issues surrounding transparency, and to ensure that you're not, you could be laundering all this money. You could have it could be proceeds of crime. It could be proceeds of corruption. It could be, and crime being huge drug cartels who have interests in, if you recall, our late former Vice President George Saitoti, shortly before he died, was going to name, there was the issue of the drug cartels who had been elected to parliament. So there are interests that want to have their cartels within parliament to then influence legislation that would be in their interest, and also influence and have their, not only in parliament, but within the executive, within the police, in all areas. So campaign financing reporting is a form of ensuring that you have in place and you're able, it's, what is the word? Transparency, for transparency reasons, and to ensure that you don't have a situation where you have cartels, criminals taking over your country or your parliament for that matter, and everything else in it.
Okay. All right. Let's just, unless Stephen, you have something on that as well, but you want to comment on the gender issue, because yes, you as executive, the executive chairperson of the Ford Kenya, you can tell us more about how your party is handling this when it comes to streamlining, women politics and empowering them. even with the nominations of a party ticket, or maybe of those tickets that we normally talk about, when it goes down to the ground, there seems to be no inter-party democracy when it comes to these issues.
Thank you. Point made. One, I still believe that we have to strengthen affirmative action for inclusion of the SIGs. That one is a principle that we must uphold for quite a long time. Now, secondly, it will be very primitive for any individual or political party to go against that principle because it is what brings in inclusivity and makes us live like partners in creation. So it's a very important process. And there are ancillary statutes on the table, like the political party primaries bill that is yet to be enacted, dealing with that issue to the extent that when it comes to the question of nomination fee, it has clearly indicated that the SIGs should always pay half what the party organ set as the nomination fee, and that is very good. And the exorbitant charges are always at a party level in the name of nomination fee. But when it comes to state requirements at the IBC, the fee required is always not as high as what we charge in the parties. And we had to do it that way at one time to ensure that the question of nomination is left to political parties and what the other stakeholders are trying to assist us regulate our activities honorably and sensibly at that lower level. That's why we want among the commissioners to include the SIGs, not just the obvious people that we know, and that will help us to strengthen the process. And look, for instance, at the Election Offences Act. It was limited to general elections and it could not be brought down to party nominations. And this gap, I think, has to be filled up through the proposal of what we call Nomination Offences Act, because of the way certain commissions, particularly the election boards, and certain leaders behave during party nominations. What they do is largely to give certificates to the people they want and not to the people who have been elected. So we need to curb this area and control it strongly to ensure that we bring sanity by giving the public the right to give us representatives and not individual leaders to make that decision. Now, when it comes to the nomination party lists, I think the principles have been set by IBC in the Constitution and they cannot be contradicted. They still stand, and depending on how many chances you win at the county assembly or parliament, you are only given a leeway to nominate as much, depending on the pro rata distribution of seats between the political parties. So you can't do much, but we have encouraged as many women, as many youth to run. We have sourced for training or capacity building programs with the development partners to help women candidates and the SIGs who wish to run to get trained on a large number of issues so that they can handle themselves during elections to run directly or to seek for a nomination in the event the party of seats. So those are affirmative principles that we uphold, and we believe they'll continue to be with us until the gender balance is sorted out, because as partners in life, we must look at each other and support each other. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, it's true. It can be very tough out there because now we do have some incremental, what is the word? gains that have been made in the affirmative action. If you look at the nomination list for Jubilee, the first nominee, you have the zebra list, was Honorable Sankoch, who is a disability. I remember I was the fourth nominee, but I went through a very, very hard time because my nomination was challenged in a court of law, in an election petition that ended at the Court of Appeal, by a man who was number 8, by a man. It didn't even make sense. But politically, it did make sense. If you look at it in retrospect, because he was insisting he wanted to be number 4. He couldn't have been, because you would have had to change the entire list. And one day, I like to say, when I'm writing my book, I will tell people and I will explain to him what the real politics of that was. Another issue to do with, and I want to agree with my colleague just now, that with Stephen, is that violence against women, gender-based violence, the real fear of rape, etc., and just gender-based violence. But also you have in political parties, you know, a political party is like a private club. It does have its rules and its own regulations, but there are some people who are given the nomination uncontested. Either they're too busy working on other issues for the party that they really don't have time to go out there and start going through a nomination cycle, a nomination election. And it can be grueling, because you know that in certain areas, once you have that ticket, you're as good as once you've been nominated on a particular ticket, you have won the election. So certain people, certain candidates will be given a nomination, direct nomination, in view of the fact that they are working and doing other things, because politics is not just campaigning on the ground or on and in rallies. There's a lot of other work that goes into it. But I do agree with Stephen, there must be more transparency. Sometimes it is very, very unfair, but such is life, and as we have these conversations, we move on and we continue to, because political patronage and a lot of these issues where the leadership of parties do know that in a particular area, once you get the nomination ticket, you're home and dry. But there are other incredible examples of women who have run as independents and against the tide and have still won that election.
Maybe bound up with that particular question again is the issue of the SIG group, of course, the SIG bill, I should say. Is there any rhyme or reason of why we should be having this particular bill? Because
which one?
Yeah, sorry.
SI?
The SIG, the special interest groups. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
it is a bill that is actually a special interest in order to bring life to the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And it is a bill that was brought by the Committee for the Constitution of the Implementation of the Constitution of Kenya Committee in Parliament. Yes, it is very, very important because, as you yourself stated, this is a diverse country with several special interests, and I don't want to refer to them. Also, they are minorities. If you really, and so we must take cognizance of those special interests.
But my question will be again: isn't this a regurgitation of the Political Parties Act 2011, where it says at least 30% of the direct public funding provided should be used for promoting the representation in Parliament and in the county assemblies of women?
Yes, for promoting representation of in Parliament.
And other minorities and marginalized communities. Isn't that just a regurgitation of what is in the Political Parties Act 2011? Why can't we?
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. It's re-emphasizing and reinforcing Article 100 of the Constitution of Kenya with regards to, I want to be absolutely sure, is it Article 100? Where is it on special interest? of the in reinforcing the implementation of the Constitution of 2010.
And that is not really the Article 26.
No, I'm reading the wrong one. I'm looking for it.
Right. Okay. Stephen, you want to comment on this? Because I have a feeling that still, when Jennifer really talks about implementation being the problem in this country, we have so many yet they seem to be one and the same thing. Just, you know, the wording, the phrasing is what is couched differently. But if you look at the essence and the substance, we are just talking about one and the same thing.
The 30% allocation to SIGs from the state fund
yes.
is a contentious issue at the moment. Why? Because not state funding to take care of the SIGs in their respective parties. So the funding itself is discriminatory, and we are fighting to ensure that it is spread across the registered political parties for that purposes of equity. So we also need to work to strengthen their capacity to enable them sit or have their own caucuses to tell the world what they need. And we go by that within our constitutional framework. Otherwise, to a large extent, we have had political parties, political leaders thinking for the SIGs much more than letting the SIGs to think for themselves for purposes of integrating the ideas in the party programs or national programs. So it has also been very difficult for political parties to source for support for capacity building for these groups. And it is an area that we need to put on the table as a big agenda and discuss and resolve on how we can make them comfortable participants in our political process.
Okay. And if I may, Dibal, like I said, I want to read out Article 100, so nobody accuses me of saying the wrong thing, that this particular act is giving life to Article 100 of the Constitution of Kenya that says, Parliament shall, not may, enact legislation to promote the representation in Parliament of women, persons with disabilities, youth, ethnic and other minorities, and marginalized communities. So it was giving life to this particular article in the Constitution.
Right, thank you. If memory may serve me well, I think was it last year or a year before, we had also your friend Gladys Bosch-Chalet coming with the notion, I don't know if it made it through to Parliament as a bill, I wonder, that, you know, also we should do away with the seats of the women rep, yeah, and people should not be really having those tokenisms as we're talking about for women. They should be on the ground really fighting like the men, as it were. So there's no preferential treatment for women, so to speak. I can't remember the actual article that it was, or maybe a draft bill that she had on that. If you may remember, do you remember that?
Yes, it was first and foremost, the woman rep seat is not tokenism. A woman represents.
No. I'm not really alluding to the fact that it's
yes, it's but Honorable Gladys Bosch-Chalet came up with a constitutional amendment, which was quite novel. It was an amendment where in constituencies, so if you have 6 constituencies, you cluster them 3-3, and then you add 1 constituency and have for a woman's seat. It came to Parliament for first reading, and I'm not sure of the status of it now because, and it may be overtaken by events in view of the BBI referendum, the Constitutional of Kenya Amendment Bill, awaiting, of course, certain decisions and awaiting the appeal. Having said that, I think you were asking about that particular bill. It was there, it is, and it's also still a backup plan. And it's not a bad plan in the event that, for whatever reason, like I said, it's always good to have a continuity program. So it was an excellent bill, and it talked about pairing like constituencies, and then having a woman rep, a special seat for women. Of course, there was talk about the fact that it would be more expensive, etc., etc., and that was, she had the numbers for that. There's always this notion that Parliament is the largest, the chunk of the national budget goes to Parliament, which is not true. It goes to the executive, and the executive is not just the presidency. The executive is the military, the executive is the police force, the executive is a lot of other things. So that was a good bill. And it was a welcome move by Honorable Boschele, or is a good bill, yeah.
Maybe also I should just bring to bear some of the questions that we have from, some of should I call them viewers, or the people who are
that
actually.
Would be wonderful. I saw a question from.
You saw a question from?
I saw a question, I can't find it now on the Zoom, where I think somebody, one of the ladies had said that the problem is not the laws, it's not the laws, it's not the laws, yeah? And it's true, it's not the law. I think there's a sense of indiscipline that we have as a nation, and it's all of us. I mean, how many times have we been told to wear masks and to social distance? You know what I mean, yeah? And so you can have as much legislation as you want. Of course, the sanctions for breaking law is punishment, and there are sanctions for breaking the law. But we break the law all the time. I can step out on the street, you'll see people not wearing masks, people not practicing social distancing, people driving too fast, people are killing people in road accidents with no concern. So I think that that's the problem that is more a social problem than anything else.
Right, and I think there are good reviews here. We have also Lilian Young saying that the wording in the 2011 piece of legislation for SIG does not provide for autonomy. Parties have had to decide what to allocate to which segment of the SIG. Those specific population groups demand for unique identities and therefore non-ambiguity when it comes to allocation of the funds. That is exactly what the new SIG law was addressing. This is from Lilian Anyango.
Is she in support of, or she's saying it does not address everything?
She's in support of it, right? She's in support of it. Yeah.
Okay. Also, what's important is because this bill is now before the Senate, and should anybody who is watching have any input or feel that they want to enhance that bill, perhaps they could bring, write to their representatives in the Senate or approach their representatives in the Senate.
All right, fantastic. Then we have Enoch Onkoba, and Stephen also, you can weigh in on this as well. He says, we cannot address the issues of gender equality by way of tokenism. We need to level the playground for everyone to participate fully in elective politics. Campaign financing is a first step towards the right direction.
Can I weigh in before Stephen, because I'm passionate about that. You know, there was a time you could campaign on a bicycle and win an election. Remember Martin Shikuku?
Yes.
And now it's impossible. You could walk and go door to door and people would vote for you. And I remember I ran for an election and lost. It was a by-election. And I just thought to myself, what was the point of even running? I should have just come on the last day with all the money I was spending in the campaign and gotten everybody, hypothetically, and then given them tokens of something, and they would have voted for me. I wish there could just be a limit, because then that becomes the level playing ground. When you have all this money and hundreds and billions of shillings, it can never be level for real leadership. And there's real leaders out there who don't have that kind of money.
Wasn't the campaign financing the essence of that? The limit to cap?
It doesn't cap. But it does not cap.
The spirit of the campaign financing.
It's to reveal where it doesn't cap, but it's to tell us where you got this money from. It doesn't cap it.
But again, maybe then we need to relook at the whole idea of it.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah, because
maybe.
now we'll
Maybe
still have
that's the conversation we should have.
Yeah, we should have a threshold that, yeah, we cannot go beyond this, even if, because how does it really address? It's just a question of accountability, right?
Exactly. Transparency and accountability, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah. But maybe we should have that conversation.
I think it's a good subject to broach and say there should be that there is, you can actually budget for yourself, okay, running for presidency, this is the amount of billions that I need, right?
Or millions, or hundreds of thousands. It doesn't have to be billions.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, Stephen, you wanted to weigh in?
Thank you, Dibala. I think on the question of tokenism.
Yes. I hope I've not lost you.
Looks like you have.
Well, I think his signal is a bit intermittent.
My view is that, and that's where we can begin. Let those. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen, I hardly got what you said because I think your internet is a bit shaky. It's buffering a lot.
Okay.
If you could, yeah, I think it's important. It bears repeating for many that actually missed your point.
Okay, what I've simply said, the is that my questionary, something small is better than nothing. But if the proponents of tokenism are of the view that nothing is better than something small, then I challenge them to help us to actualize that, to help us understand that it is better than to have than to have something small. Otherwise, where we're progressing the debate to a better end.
Okay, good. Okay, maybe I should just move on with this suggestions or comments that are being made and questions as well. And it'll just give us an inkling of what other questions maybe we should bring on the table as well. We have Enoch Onkoba also saying, not Enoch, but John Herring saying, how shall women be elected in good number to meet gender equity in parliament? This is Jennifer. Also, maybe I should bound that question with the issue of not really ethnicity, but on the campaigning, since you've mentioned the campaign capping on the campaign financing. On the question of when to stop campaigning, it will be very hard for a politician to set up a cap on when they stop practicing what they know best. It's like setting a cap on when lawyers can represent their clients and when they cannot.
Yes.
Yes.
I read that and I tend to agree. Politicians, and even those who are incoming and you see them on Twitter, they've already started the campaigns, yeah? Politicians are always campaigning, even when they're in parliament, even when they are making contributions on the floor of the House, they will be, because that is their job, to represent and speak for and on behalf of their people. So they're representing and they're campaigning. Because if you're not campaigning, and 5 years is a very short time. I can't believe that it's 2017 that I was sworn in and we're looking at an election just around the corner. So you do sometimes take a break, even as advocates. You don't represent your client 24/7 unless you have to. And but this constant cycle, I wish and I long for the day in my lifetime where when we will have an election, we will be more concerned about the economy, the stock market, than about who really becomes the president of this country. That will be the day, because it doesn't matter who will be the president, as long as it's a good president, and I'm sure Kenyans will vote for a good president. But yes, with this continuous election cycles can drain people, it causes uncertainty. And not so much, the issue with Kenya now is not the problem of politics, it's the pandemic. But definitely in 2017, on the when the Supreme Court upheld the constitution, the election results of the presidential election, it caused tremendous economic damage to the country.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think Kenyans have scruples with campaigning per se. It is just the mode of campaign that we see, right?
Yes,
because
the toxic, abusive mode of campaign. It's very worrying. But it's not only the politicians. I mean, I had to block somebody. I hardly block anyone on Twitter if you'll engage me. And you know me, Dibal, you've known me for a long time. We can have opposing views, but I will respect your right to say it. And you may convince me or I may convince you, but the vulgarity, the kind of things you see. And it was a lady, and what she said on that Twitter, I just blocked her. I can't respond to somebody like that. But this rude, abusive kind of talk. In fact, I want to read a tweet to you, and it's very unfortunate. And I want to disagree. But this morning, a very close friend of mine sent me a clip of somebody who was, and I was like, oh my gosh, somebody who is running for office in the next election, yeah. And she said, but Kenyans like these type of antics. There's little room for sophistication and education unless it's a parastatal or a diplomatic post. The frontline leaders have to be a bit crazy. For Kenyans, it's about entertainment all the time. Without Twitter and videos, you will never be popular. She was referring to somebody. Now, is that not very sad?
Yeah, it's sad, but that's the reality on the ground as well. Yeah, I think, and also we journalists have contributed that much in terms of trying to steamroll that kind of conversation where we want entertainment in our conversation.
Yeah, but you can also have, I think I think social media, you can't, but I suppose you can report abusive behavior, vulgarity, pornography, all these things. It's too much, I don't think, but it is, the journalists are very important in shaping. There's nothing wrong in shaping a debate and getting it very, very heated. It's good because then you get the reality of what, people feel. But where it becomes abusive, it degenerates, it's sad, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's true. Also, a question also for you, Stephen. This John Herring was saying or asking, how sure are we that the next coming election will be credible and fair enough in regards to the remaining time, that is 14 months? Will IBC achieve this, Stephen?
Now, we leave that to God in the first place. We need the spiritual realm, particularly the religious fraternity, to keep praying for us, because what drives us into violence and other guilty behavior is an aspect of the dark forces beyond our own control. So much as we may think that we have the capacity to do that, we need God's grace through prayers, I think, to have a clean and transparent election. So let's hope for the best. At our moral level, secular level, let the laws that were put in place enable us to be strong and fair enough to do the right thing during elections.
That's fair enough.
I cannot agree more. You need the grace of the Almighty Elohim. There's some things which we never foresaw this pandemic, yes? And it is by His grace. And but also and I agree, we pray first, we fast. You can change nations by fasting and the history and the destiny of a nation. And so I want to agree with Stephen wholly on that. There is a question here by David Burare. Has interference by the executive derailed the efficiency of the IEBC? I don't know which interference he's referring to, but if and indeed the 2017 election where the Supreme Court upheld the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta, had there been interference, it would have been brought out in that decision, and there wasn't any interference by the executive of the IEBC. and to what extent has Article 10 been adhered to by the executive? I think it's, you just have to look at the composition of, if I look at the ministers that come to mind, Ukar Yatani is a Gabra from Marsabit. You have, I think, 1 or 2 Somali CSs. So if you just look at it, I think the executive is trying, and that I don't have the composition with me, but just thinking about those people. And then the women appointees, there's Amina, there's CS Amina, there's CS Farida Karane, there's CS Rachel Omamo. So they are also trying to adhere to Article 10, which is women, marginalized groups, disabilities, etc.
Right. Another question for you as well, Jennifer. Will extension of government structure solve issues of distrust among political players and more so communities in Kenya?
Yes, it will, because like I said, and as we're coming to the close of this, is it a meeting? Is it a conference? Is it a talk? Yeah, discourse, the close of this discourse. I grew up in the Nyayo era, where we were a united Kenya. I remember during the 1982 coup, the head of the military was one General Mahmoud, who is from Garissa. And we grew up really not knowing, they concentrated on English and Kiswahili for that generation. But we were Kenyan. We were Kenyan. Since the multi-party and the repeal of Section 2A, we have become completely ethnicized. And we have realized that the elections are so important. It's a winner-take-it-all election. Our understanding, not realize, our understanding, and probably reality, and correctly so. And once my person gets in, I will get jobs, my people will get jobs. And if we do not expand this presidency to include more Kenyans, then I don't think we are going to resolve our problems. And that was the underpinning of the BBI. That is what the people said. They said this winner takes it all is not going to work. And I'll keep on repeating it. 58 years after the independence, we had we had the prime minister. Okay, Jomo Kenyatta, the late Jomo Kenyatta was the prime minister and later became president, and was Raila Odinga in one small term, but it has been between 2 ethnic groups, and that's 58 years after independence.
Composition and quorum are 2 distinct matters. Composition is about the number that forms the body, while quorum, that is IBC, while quorum is a minimum number allowed to operate on behalf of a constitute body. This is what Enoch Onkobo was throwing to us as well when we're talking about the composition of IBC.
Yes.
You know, operate. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you want Stephen or you, Jennifer. You can weigh in.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I think the quorum of the the composition, constitutional composition is 3, and that is the composition of the IEBC. The quorum is when you have meetings within the IEBC, and for those meetings, I think in the IEBC Act, whether it's 2 or 3, they're still validly they are within the law. They're acting within the law. There is nothing illegal that with regards to the composition and quorum of the IEBC.
Thank you very much. Because I know we just have a few minutes to wind up. I know Maureen also, she's breathing down my neck to wind up.
Yes.
But I'd be remiss if we don't really talk about, the latest development with the BBI in light of this, because I think enshrined within BBI is electoral reforms, what you're really talking about. So is that whole process really scuppered as it is?
Sorry, please repeat that.
Well, I'll be remiss. I was saying I'll be remiss if we don't really talk about BBI and the latest BBI as it is right now with from the courts. The question is, and I had maybe Stephen will come to you because I've had you twice saying that the judgment was trash. You might want to defend that, why you call it trash. Stephen? Stephen, remember to unmute your mic.
Oh, thank you. Are we talking about IPPG?
No, not the IPPG, but the BBI. And the latest
ruling.
ruling.
I said the BBI crashed. Yeah, the latest ruling at the High Court crashed BBI.
Okay,
There's no doubt about that.
Okay, so did I get
whatever goods on board have been scattered.
So maybe it didn't come clearly.
Yeah.
Crashing, or because trashed at the law, the trash at the
crash.
Trash, or the trash, or the
it crashed. Yes, I said it crashed at the law courts.
Okay.
And this is normal for political dialectics. And I said that BBI being a thesis, it must face an antithesis to expect a synthesis. And so the process will somersault. So the synthesis is going to the appeal court. And that is what we are preparing to do, because I do believe in the value of BBI, and we must do something not to lose most of the value it has brought us.
Thank you. So somebody has said that Mheshimiwa Shamala keeps on referring to the BBI in a manner that if one was a visitor to this country would think it is our second Messiah. No, I have, and I believe in only one Messiah, Yeshua the Messiah, and I definitely believe in the second coming of that Messiah. But I do believe that anything that will better Kenya, I believe in it passionately. So I'm glad that you see the spiritual fervor in my belief. And like Stephen has said, there will be a lot in the coming days. I, for one, am going to request for something that I don't want to make known here, but there is a synthesis. There is what is it again, Stephen? The thesis, the
antithesis.
The antithesis, the thesis, and the synthesis. And we understand exactly what is going on. I am one of the people who voted no in the 2010 Constitution because of the 20% that was bad, yes? I like to say that I'm very consistent, but when the people of Kenya voted in the majority, I too have sworn to uphold this constitution. And what I voted no for in that constitution, I have seen come to pass. I would love to have a conversation on that another day, another time. And we await, as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, I will not comment because the matter is now at the appellate process. Suffice to say, it is very important for everyone to know that Justice Mativo ruled last year that President Uhuru Kenyatta was within his rights. So you have now a contesting decision in the courts, in the same court, the High Court of Kenya. One judge had said, and there is the principle of precedence, that actually he was within the rights. And this recent ruling of last week has contradicted that ruling. So those issues will be addressed at the appellate level.
So are we looking at what it was addressing was the issue with the 41 judges when he made this particular ruling, and then we have was the issue with the 41 judges where he made this
issue with the 41 judges? Actually, I'd like to say I've always been stating it wrong, incorrectly on media, is that indeed, when you apply to become a judge of the High Court of Kenya, the Judicial Service Commission writes to various agencies, KRA for your tax returns, HELB to see if you've cleared your loans, and the National Security Intelligence Service. Now, what happened? The National Security Intelligence Service sent adverse information on 14 judges. The number could be wrong, but what I'm telling you now is a fact, yes? Adverse information accompanied with an affidavit. This affidavit and this adverse information was removed from the files. Did you hear what I said, Dibal?
No, I heard you.
Yes. And when the names went to the President of the Republic of Kenya, the law is very clear, he must swear in all. He can't cherry pick and say, but these 14, this is the adverse, and I'm saying it so passionately because I'm not going to say it here, but it is time we get to know what this adverse info. I have one or two that are very, very, and it will come out, Debala, and then you'll call me, we'll have coffee, and I'll say, you see, I told you, yeah? Adverse information, and you want to be judges of this country. So you are the only ones who are not subjected to any kind of scrutiny. The executive can be subjected to scrutiny, members of parliament. NSIS sent it and it was removed. It is time questions start asking under access to information what that adverse information was and why was it removed. If somebody said today that Jennifer Shamala is XYZ and cast aspirations on my character and it were not true, the first thing I would do is come out and say, there is this information stating that, and it's adverse, and it has said this about me. It is not true, and I would prove to you that it wasn't true. Why was this information and affidavit hidden?
All right, thank you. As we bring it to a close, I wanted to know, since now was the president also caught in a bind where, of course, he has all this information, maybe, and he has all the 41 judges' names, but this entire process cannot go back because it cannot go back to JSC. So he's caught in.
Oh, yes, it can go back because all sovereign power lies with the people of Kenya. You can go and make an application under access to information provided for in this constitution and say you want that information. You want it opened up. Unfortunately, you would have to do it through the courts. And I don't know if the courts will give us that, but this is the conversation we're going to have as Kenyans, because we are tried as Kenyans very quickly before those magistrates courts and those judges courts. You know what they say, if you're a chicken thief, yes? But there is adverse information and it has not been revealed to us. So it's not that, so what are you saying? Now there is no going back? If you knew what this adverse information, and I only know of 2 issues, I don't even know of the others, it's earth-shattering information.
Earth-shattering information, right.
Earth-shattering.
I'm sure we'll take you on that. We'll have that call because, yeah, I really am eager to know what is this earth-shattering information as well.
And I only know of 2.
You only know of 2, so there could be many. Right.
No, I'm saying there was adverse information, I think against 14, I'm not sure whether it's 14 or who, but I know of 2 instances, which is quite earth-shattering. And they know that we know. And that what had happened is, and when the Chief Justice nominee appeared before the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, she was asked about the relationship between the executive and the judiciary. Now, the executive is not just the president, it is the NSIS, it is the security agencies, yes? How do you ask a security agency for information on a candidate and then when it arrives, it is shoved and put under some shelf or files?
Okay, right. Stephen, I want to just bring it to a close and give you also opportunity for your headline thoughts as well. What do you have to say in entirety when we're looking at this discussion we've had, and of course we've broached a lot of issues as far as the bills are concerned? What is the way forward? Stephen, briefly.
Oh yeah, thank you. I think we need to put our agenda on the table seriously and focus on it for completion before it is too late. So let's have the election coming when we have thrashed all the issues of concern before then.
You don't think we're really stuck?
All the proposed, so I'm saying the pending legal legislations should be dealt with in time. Now the structural arrangements at the IBC and any other duty-bound body should also be attended to so that and be given a timeline, let's say before the end of this year, so that we start next year when we have very little to clear on the table in order to have a good and transparent general election.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think also you conveniently left out what Enoch was asking you as well when you were talking about the Messiah, because he said it is his considered view that the BBI is a perfect example of vow not to legislate, not good for the country, right?
Okay, you know, that will be left. And I don't know why there is so much resistance to this BBI, because even you can bring a popular initiative, even Enoch can bring anyone can bring a popular initiative. But
yes,
sometimes the resistance tells you what could be the problem, because go to either, if it's a popular initiative, if it requires a referendum, the people of Kenya will ultimately vote on it. If it's a parliamentary initiative, the representatives of the people of Kenya will ultimately vote on it. But when I see the resistance, this tremendous resistance, if it's so laughable, if it's so actually laughable, then why would you be afraid of it? Because you know that it couldn't even pass at a referendum.
all right, good question. So unless there is any other question, I think that is really pressing, I think we should be winding up. You are addressing that particular question, but your headline thoughts moving forward, Jennifer. We've heard from Stephen. You?
My headline thoughts?
Yes.
We're concentrate. For me, as a member of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, I have just gotten communication that we must attend a special sitting of Parliament on Wednesday for the tabling of the report of the Chief Justice nominee, Martha Koome. And that is what my headline thoughts and moments are, because I'm looking forward to, we table our report and voting, and I hope that the National Assembly will see that she's fit to become the first woman of one of the arms of government in this country.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yes, as a Chief Justice.
The Chief Justice as well. Well, I really want to appreciate all of us this afternoon. Stephen, thank you very much for that cogent, very insightful discussions that we've had, as always as well. Jennifer Shamala, thank you for your input, very cogent.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think you've really broadened my understanding as well. So also for me, it's been enlightening. And I'm looking forward to see what will be playing out as far as the BBI is concerned as well. But I think Maureen will just indulge me a bit, because I've been struggling with the notion of the BBI, the way it started, and maybe I can try and extrapolate the same with the Huduma number. Remember, we had the same framework that people were saying, on what legal framework are we operating on? On what legal framework is it really pegged on? And then we had the Huduma number bill coming to fore, working retrospectively. You know, now we sort of were really working backwards. Yeah. Doesn't this just looks the same? I mean, the parallels, they're very similar. There's nothing like chalk and cheese in terms of difference. It's just BBI and Huduma number playing out the same. Are we not, or was the legal team for the presidency also none the wiser that we should have learned from Huduma number and, you know, do things differently with BBI?
But legislation, and who's that question to, Debo? Is it to me?
Yeah, or even Stephen, if he can actually weigh on his.
I mean, legislation is made for posterity. Even this Huduma number, you remember e-citizen?
Yeah, I agree, but my question is,
now you can barely, not that it works perfectly, you can barely do anything without e-citizen, yes? So we make legislation for our time and for posterity. And not, when I talk about legislation, constitutions are made, and they're not cast in stone, right? They're made for now and for posterity. We're making it for the future, not for the past. We have learned from the lessons of the past, but we're making it for the future.
I have no qualms. I have no qualms at all with it. But what I'm asking is, do you pop up with just BBI bill without any legal framework around it?
How do we? how can it be there's no legal framework? There was a handshake, there was a task force, they traveled around the country. The process started in 2018, we're in 2021, and then there was a bill.
Okay, let's hear from Stephen on this.
What I know is that the Huduma number is now going concern, and I don't think it has any issues. What is next is that they have to rope in the people who failed to register during the first season.
Yeah,
so the Huduma number is.
I have to butt in a bit. You
sorry, Dibal, I'm going to have to leave shortly. You said 4:30 and it's going on to 16:45. I have another meeting.
Actually, we're done. It's actually just getting clarification on the Huduma number and trying to extrapolate what we saw with the Huduma number and BBI.
Okay.
This is where I'm challenging Stephen to just clarify. He says it's a going concern currently, so there are no scruples around the Huduma number. It's going down. But we saw people challenging Huduma number as well, saying that there was no legal framework.
True, we overcame. We overcame the challenges, and so it's water under the bridge for Huduma number. It's a going concern. Now for BBI, I think what we are trying to reflect is whether the theory of the handshake was good, and BBI as the thesis is faulty or not. So these are the areas we are looking into as we go to the appeal court to make sure that and we allow BBI to move also.
Fantastic. Thank you. Once again, Jennifer and Stephen, thank you for consenting to be part of this discussion this afternoon. Very informative, enjoyable. I've really also learned a lot, as I mentioned, from you guys. Thank you so much. And I hope.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for all the participants. I've enjoyed reading your comments, and it's been really lovely to have so much interaction and with an audience that's very informed and has and not opinionated in a wrong way, but has a lot and has contributed through their opinions in the chats. I really appreciate it, and thank you to the Center for Multi-Party Democracy for making this happen.
All right, thank you, and thank you also for just doing my job and helping me there. To thank CMD as well for organizing this forum, and every participant that kept their eyes peeled and also kept out their ears to listen to some of this insightful conversation. Kudos to you. Thank you for being amazingly patient. I know we've spilled over time, and also Jennifer, she's pinched for time. She has to go. Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you so much, Jennifer. See you.
Asante sana.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot.
Karibu sana. Thank you to our facilitator. I know Honorable Shamala has left, but thank you so much to her. Thank you so much, Bonanda Musule. Dibal, thank you so much for the perfect moderation, and also not to forget the 11 political parties that are represented here. Thank you for making time out to attend this meeting. From here in CMD-Kenya, just say asante sana, and I hope that we'll continue interacting even as we continue, moving toward 22 general election to ensure in an orderly manner. From here in CMD-Kenya, asanteni sana na mkwe na jioni njema na weekend njema. Thank you so much and goodbye. You can all leave at your own pleasure.